After I paid for mom's surgery, my sister told everyone I barely helped. When mom posted a photo thanking her, I just commented, glad she finally covered the $47 taxi. The notification lit up my phone screen with an innocent chime, the kind you hear 100 times a day and ignore. But this one felt different. It was a cold Tuesday in November, the sky, the color of dishwater, and I was sitting in my tiny apartment, trying to summon the energy to celebrate 6 months of sobriety. 6 months of fighting tooth and nail for a life that felt like my own. The chime was from Facebook, a platform I mostly use to keep tabs on distant relatives. A photo tag. My mother, Carol, had posted something. My thumb hovered over the notification, a familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. With my family, especially with my mother and my sister, Jenna, no news was usually good news. I tapped it open. The picture was of my mom, sitting up in a hospital bed. She looked frail, smaller than I remembered, but she was smiling. The harsh, fluorescent light of the room caught the silver in her hair. Beside her, beaming as if she'd just won an Olympic medal, was Jenna, my older sister. She had one arm wrapped possessively around mom's shoulders, her other hand holding up a bouquet of garish, oversized lilies. The caption was what sent a shard of ice through my veins. It was written by my mother, but the syrupy, self-aggrandizing tone was pure Jenna. So grateful for my angel daughter, Jenna, it read. I truly don't know what I would have done without her. Through this whole scary ordeal, she has been my rock, my provider, and my savior. Thank you for making this life-saving surgery possible. You are the most generous person I know. My breath caught in my throat. I read it again and again. My provider, my savior, making this surgery possible. The words swam before my eyes, hot and blurry. My savings account, which I had spent the last 5 years building with painstaking discipline, was now a ghost town, a flat, desolate landscape of just a few $100s. The rest of it, a staggering $87,000, had been wired directly to the hospital's billing department 2 weeks ago to cover the open heart surgery my mother had desperately needed, an experimental procedure her insurance had refused to cover. I had done it without hesitation. I had liquidated stocks. I had cashed out retirement savings I'd started in my 20s. I had done it because she was my mother and she was dying. And here was Jenna, who had contributed nothing, not a single penny. She had shown up at the hospital for the photo op, clutching flowers she probably put on a credit card she'd have trouble paying off. She had offered emotional support, which in Jenna's world meant fluttering around the waiting room, accepting condolences from relatives as if she were the one undergoing trauma, and complaining about the quality of the coffee. She had been a nuisance, a performative martyr whose only actual contribution was the stress she added to an already unbearable situation. And now, she was being publicly crowned a saint. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the comments. They were a sickening cascade of praise for Jenna. You're an amazing daughter, Jenna, from Aunt Carol. Your mother is so lucky to have you, from a cousin I hadn't seen in a decade. A true angel on earth. Each comment was a fresh stab. They were celebrating a fiction, a complete and utter lie, and in doing so, they were erasing me. They were erasing my sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the terror of watching my life savings vanish in a single transaction. They were erasing the fact that I was the one who had sat with the doctors, who had signed the forms, who had held my mother's hand until they wheeled her away into the operating room. Rage, white hot and pure, surged through me. It was a familiar feeling, one I had spent the last 6 months learning to manage in recovery. My sponsor, David, always told me to play the tape forward. What happens if you give in to the anger? What happens if you let it consume you? In the past, it would have led me to a bottle. It would have led me to oblivion, a temporary silence from the screaming injustice in my head. But I couldn't do that now. I wouldn't. Sobriety had given me clarity, and in that clarity, I saw Jenna's manipulation for what it was. A pattern, a lifelong campaign to diminish me, to position herself as the golden child while I was cast as the troubled, unreliable one. My past struggles were her favorite weapon. My battle with alcohol had become the family's convenient explanation for everything. If I was upset, I was being dramatic or unstable. If I set a boundary, I was fragile and can't handle things. It was the perfect narrative for her. She was the steady, successful one. I was the charity case, the project, the one who could never quite get it right. And I had let them believe it for years, because it was easier than fighting. Because a part of me believed it too. Paying for the surgery was supposed to be my silent rebuttal, a definitive act of love and responsibility that no one could deny. I hadn't wanted a parade or a medal. I had just wanted the quiet truth to exist. But Jenna couldn't allow that. The truth was not in her interest. The truth would have meant acknowledging my capability, my sacrifice. It would have meant I wasn't the screw-up anymore. And so she had stolen it, twisted it, and broadcast her own version to the world. With our mother as her willing co-conspirator, I looked at my mother's smiling face in the photo, and a profound, hollow sadness settled over me. She knew the truth. She had to. She had cried on the phone with me, thanking me, telling me I had saved her life. Had she forgotten? Or was it just easier to go along with Jenna's fantasy, to keep the peace, to placate the daughter who was loudest and most demanding? My thumb hovered over the comment box. I could unleash a firestorm. I could write, I paid for the entire thing, you lying hypocrite. I could detail the wire transfer, the exact amount, the date. I could burn it all to the ground. But David's voice was in my head again. Play the tape forward. A public, messy fight would only feed Jenna's narrative. See, there she goes again. Unstable, looking for attention, causing drama right after poor mom's surgery. I would be the villain. She had set the perfect trap. I closed my eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath. I had to be smarter than her. I had to be more precise. I couldn't use a bomb. I needed a scalpel. I thought back over the past few weeks. The chaos, the phone calls, the logistics. Jenna had been an expert at delegating. She had sent me lists of things mom needed, things I was expected to fetch. She had called me a dozen times a day with frantic, unnecessary updates. I remembered one call vividly. She was at the hospital the day before the surgery and had forgotten her wallet. She demanded I come bring her cash for the taxi home. I was over an hour away, coordinating with the hospital's financial office, and I'd told her no. I told her to use a ride-sharing app, that I would cover it. She'd grumbled, but agreed. I remembered the notification on my phone later that day. A $47 charge. $47. That was the sum total of her financial contribution to this entire ordeal. It was a pathetic, almost comical amount when set against the $87,000 I had paid. It was a detail. A small, verifiable, and deeply humiliating detail. It was the scalpel. My fingers moved, typing slowly and deliberately. The rage had subsided, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. I wasn't writing to the family members who had already chosen their side. I was writing for the silent observers, for the people who knew our family history, for the few who might still be capable of seeing the truth. And I was writing for myself. It was a single sentence, a quiet declaration of fact. I typed it under my mother's glowing tribute to her savior daughter. Then I hit post. Glad she finally covered the $47 taxi. I set my phone down on the table, face down. I didn't want to see the fallout. Not yet. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray city. For the first time in hours, I could breathe. The knot in my stomach was still there, but it had loosened its grip. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't accused. I had simply held up a tiny, undeniable mirror to her grand deception. It was a small act, but it was mine. And in the quiet of my apartment, with the 6-month sobriety chip feeling heavy and real in my pocket, it felt like a victory. The silence lasted for exactly 17 minutes. Then my phone began to vibrate against the cheap laminate of my kitchen table, a furious, insistent buzzing that sounded like a trapped hornet. I knew without looking that it was Jenna. I let it go to voicemail. A second later, it started again. I let it go again. The third time, I answered, but I didn't speak. I just held the phone to my ear, listening to the sound of her ragged breathing on the other end. "What the hell did you just do?" she hissed. Her voice was sharp, stripped of the sugary sweetness she used for public consumption. This was the real Jenna, the one I had grown up with. I remained silent. I had learned over the years that my silence infuriated her more than any argument. It denied her the fight she craved, the drama she fed on. "Are you listening to me?" she shrieked. "You go on mom's post in front of everyone and you post that garbage? What is wrong with you? Are you drinking again? You must be drinking again. Only a drunk would do something so petty and cruel." There it was, her go-to weapon. My sobriety was always conditional in her eyes, a fragile state she could question at any moment to invalidate my feelings or my actions. It was the cornerstone of her campaign to discredit me. "I'm not drinking, Jenna," I said, my voice surprisingly calm and steady. "I just stated a fact." "A fact? A fact?" She let out a laugh that was more of a bark. "You think that's a fact? You're trying to humiliate me. You're trying to make it look like I didn't do anything for our mother after everything I've done." "What have you done, Jenna?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. "Tell me, what exactly have you done?" This was the moment of revelation. I had a sudden, inexplicable premonition. I fumbled for my laptop, which was open on the table. With my free hand, I clicked on the audio recording software I used for my freelance transcription work. It was a long shot, but something in her voice, a manic, unhinged energy, told me this was important. I hit the record button. "What have I done?" she screeched, her voice rising in pitch. "I have been here. I have been holding her hand. I have been talking to the nurses. I have been managing her care. I have been her emotional rock while you were God knows where, probably wallowing in self-pity." "I was at the bank, Jenna," I said softly. "I was at the bank, draining my life savings to pay for the surgery. The surgery that cost $87,000, the one you're taking credit for." There was a brief, stunned silence on her end. I had never confronted her so directly before. I had always let her spin her narratives, too exhausted or too intimidated to challenge them. Then she started to laugh. It was a horrifying sound, full of genuine, triumphant malice. "Oh, you poor, naive little thing," she sneered. "You think that money matters? You think throwing money at a problem is the same as actually being there, of actually caring? That's so typical of you. You buy your way out of responsibility because you can't handle real emotion. You paid. So what? That was the easy part. I'm the one who did the hard work. I'm the one who deserves the credit. Mom sees it. Everyone sees it." My blood ran cold. She wasn't even denying it. She was admitting it, gloating about it. She was twisting my sacrifice into a flaw, a sign of emotional deficiency. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. "You think you're so clever with your little comment?" she continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "The $47 taxi. You think you exposed me? All you did was show everyone how petty and jealous you are. You made yourself look pathetic. You can't stand that mom relies on me, that she loves me more. She needed me, her real daughter, not her walking, talking bank account." Every word was designed to wound, to hit the deepest insecurities I had carried my entire life. The feeling of being secondary, of my worth being conditional. She knew exactly where to aim. "So go ahead," she spat. "Keep your receipts. Frame your bank statements. Nobody cares. They care about love, about presence, about devotion, things you wouldn't understand. I won. I will always win, because I know how to play the game, and you don't. Now, you are going to go back to that post. You are going to delete your disgusting comment, and you are going to apologize for upsetting our mother during her recovery." "No," I said. The word was small, but it felt like the heaviest thing I had ever lifted. "What did you say?" "No, Jenna. I'm not deleting it, and I'm not apologizing." The fury fury on the other end of the line was palpable. I could almost feel the heat of it through the phone. "You will regret this," she whispered, her voice a low, dangerous threat. "I will make you regret this for the rest of your life." She hung up. I sat in the echoing silence, my hand still clutching the phone. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but a strange sense of calm was settling over me. She had done it. She had confessed. She had laid her entire, twisted worldview bare, and I had it. I had her voice, her words, her remorseless, gloating confession. I clicked save on the audio file, naming it Jenna, the truth. It was my new hidden advantage. The game had changed. My Uncle Mark called about an hour later. He was my mom's younger brother, a retired cop with a no-nonsense attitude and a built-in lie detector that had served him well for 30 years on the force. He was one of the few family members who had never treated me like a broken toy. "Just saw the circus on Facebook," he said, his voice a low grumble. "You okay?" "I've been better," I admitted, the tension of the past few hours making my voice crack. "I figured. Your sister's lighting up the family group chat with stories about how you're off the rails again. Says you're trying to extort her." "Extort her?" I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "She doesn't have any money to extort, Mark. That's the whole point." "I know the story, kid," he said gently. "Your mom told me you were covering the surgery. She was crying, said she didn't know how she could ever repay you. Seems she's changed her tune since Jenna got her claws in." Hearing that validation from him, that someone else knew the truth, was like a balm on a raw wound. "I don't know what to do, Mark. She's twisting everything. She's making me out to be the bad guy. That's her specialty," he said grimly. "Listen to me. Don't engage with her online. Don't respond to the flying monkeys she's sending your way. Just go quiet and start gathering your paperwork." "My paperwork?" "Yeah, the wire transfer confirmation. The hospital invoice showing a zero balance. Any emails or texts between you and the hospital, or you and your mom about the payment. Get it all together. You might need it." "Need it for what? To prove to Aunt Carol that I'm not a monster?" "Forget Aunt Carol. You need it for you. And maybe for a lawyer." The word lawyer landed with a thud in the pit of my stomach. It felt so extreme, so final. Suing my own family? But as I thought about Jenna's threats, her absolute conviction that she could get away with this, I realized Mark was right. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. This was fraud. This was theft of credit on a grand scale. And it was part of a larger pattern of emotional and psychological abuse. My comment on Facebook was a defensive move. Now, I had to decide if I was ready to go on the offensive. "I recorded her, Mark," I said quietly, the admission surprising even myself. "She called me screaming. She admitted everything, gloated about it. I have it on an audio file." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Mark spoke again, his voice had a new edge to it. "Good girl," he said, a note of pride in his tone. "That's my niece. You hold on to that. Don't send it to anyone. Don't even tell anyone else you have it. That's your ace in the hole. Now, I'm going to give you the name of a lawyer. She's smart, she's tough, and she doesn't put up with any nonsense. Her name is Sarah Chen. Call her tomorrow." After I hung up with Mark, I felt a shift inside me. The initial shock and hurt were hardening into something else. Resolve. For years, I had been the family shock absorber. I had soaked up the dysfunction, the passive aggression, the outright cruelty, because I believed it was the price of admission. My past mistakes had put me in a deficit, and I thought I had to spend the rest of my life making up for it, earning back their love and respect. But I realized now that for Jenna, and maybe even for my mother, there was no amount I could pay that would ever clear that debt. They needed me in that box. My recovery, my stability, my financial independence. It was a threat to the established order of things. The surgery payment had been the ultimate threat. It was an act of competence and love so significant that it shattered the screw-up narrative completely, and Jenna couldn't have that. So she had to steal it, to claim it as her own, to put me back in my place. Her monologue wasn't just a confession of a lie. It was a declaration of her entire philosophy. In her world, perception was reality. Truth was whatever story she could get enough people to believe. And my money was just a tool, a resource she was entitled to use in the construction of her own heroic narrative. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my computer and began the meticulous process of building my case. I downloaded the bank statement showing the $87,000 wire transfer to the hospital. I found the email confirmation from the hospital's finance department. I saved screenshots of texts from my mother from a month prior, where she had written, "I don't know what I'd do without you, honey. You're saving my life, and I will never forget it." I compiled every piece of digital evidence into a single, password-protected folder. It was a sterile, impersonal collection of facts, but it felt like armor. The next morning, my hands shaking slightly, I called Sarah Chen. Her voice was crisp and professional, immediately inspiring a sense of confidence. I stumbled through the story, feeling foolish and overly emotional as I recounted the Facebook post, the phone call, the family history. I expected her to dismiss it as a petty family drama, a case not worth her time. Instead, she listened patiently, interrupting only to ask clarifying questions. "What was the exact amount? Was there any written agreement? Did your mother ever refer to it as a loan?" "No, it was a gift," I said. "I never expected to get it back. This isn't about the money. It's about the lie, the character assassination." "I understand," Sarah said. "But in the eyes of the law, what you're describing could be framed in a few ways. While getting your money back might not be your primary goal, it is the most concrete legal remedy available. We could potentially look at this as a case of unjust enrichment or promissory estoppel, especially if your sister's actions are causing you tangible harm." I didn't understand half the legal terms she was using, but I understood the core message. There was a path. The system had language for this kind of betrayal. "What about the recording?" I asked, my voice low. "Our state has one-party consent laws," she said, and I could hear her smile through the phone. "As long as you were a party to the conversation, it's admissible. That recording is extremely valuable. It establishes intent. I booked an appointment with her for the following week. When I hung up, I felt a sliver of hope. The fight ahead would be ugly and draining, but for the first time, I wasn't alone. I had Uncle Mark in my corner, I had my sponsor David to keep me grounded, and now I had Sarah Chen, a professional who could translate my pain into legal strategy. The first salvo from Jenna's side arrived 3 days later via a certified letter. It was a cease and desist notice from a lawyer whose letterhead looked like it was designed in 1995. The letter was a masterpiece of projection and fabrication. It accused me of harassment, of intentionally inflicting emotional distress upon my recovering mother, and of attempting to extort money from my sister. It claimed that my libelous comment on social media was part of a calculated campaign of intimidation. The letter demanded I not only delete the comment, but also post a public apology and refrain from any further contact with Jenna or my mother. If I failed to comply, it threatened swift legal action. I laughed. Reading the letter after my conversation with Sarah was like watching a child threaten a professional athlete. It was all bluster, a transparent attempt to scare me into submission. Jenna was used to me folding. She was counting on it. I scanned the letter and emailed it to Sarah with a one-line message. Looks like she's getting started. Sarah's reply was prompt. Standard intimidation tactics. Ignore it. We'll be sending our own correspondence shortly. The battle lines were drawn. For the next few weeks, the conflict moved from the emotional arena of social media to the cold, procedural world of legal correspondence. Sarah drafted a demand letter that was a work of art. It was calm, factual, and utterly devastating. It laid out the timeline of the surgery payment, attached the wire transfer confirmation, and referenced the existence of an audio recording in which Jenna admitted to her campaign of lies. It didn't demand the full $87,000 back. Instead, it proposed a settlement. Jenna was to co-sign a letter, to be sent to all family members and posted on her own social media, clarifying the source of the surgical funds. She was also to pay me a symbolic sum of $5,000 for reputational damages and emotional distress. Finally, she was to agree to a legally binding no-contact order. This gives her an out, Sarah explained. It's not about bankrupting her. It's about getting the truth on the record and getting her out of your life. A judge would see this as a reasonable offer, which will work in our favor if this proceeds to court. Jenna's response, via her lawyer, was a flat refusal. The letter claimed my evidence was fabricated, and my recording was illegal, a bluff Sarah saw through immediately. It doubled down on the narrative that I was unstable and vindictive. It was clear Jenna believed she could win a war of attrition, that she could wear me down, drain my limited financial resources, and paint me as the aggressor. During this time, the family fractured completely. I was inundated with calls and texts from relatives I barely knew, all parroting Jenna's talking points. They accused me of being selfish, of putting money before family, of stressing out my mother. My mother herself was a ghost. She wouldn't answer my calls. The only communication I had from her was a stilted, formal text message that had Jenna's fingerprints all over it. I am very disappointed in your behavior, it read. You are tearing this family apart. Jenna has been nothing but good to me. Please stop this. That text was the rock bottom. It was the moment I realized I had lost my mother, not to her illness, but to my sister's influence. She had made her choice. She had chosen the comforting lie over the difficult truth. She had chosen the daughter who told her what she wanted to hear over the one who had actually saved her. The grief was immense, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. I found myself standing in front of a liquor store, the neon lights blurring through the tears in my eyes. The old craving was back, a siren song promising numbness, escape, a few hours of quiet. My hand was on the door. It would be so easy. Just one bottle, just one night off from the pain. My phone rang. It was David, my sponsor. It was as if he had a sixth sense for my moments of weakness. Just checking in, he said, his voice calm and steady. How are you holding up? Not good, David, I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. I'm standing outside a liquor store. He didn't lecture or judge. He just said, okay, can you do me a favor? Just walk to the corner. Just get yourself to the end of the block, then call me back. I did as he asked. I turned away from the door and forced my feet to move. With each step, the pull of the store lessened. By the time I reached the corner, the spell was broken. I called him back and I talked. I told him everything. About the text from my mom, about the feeling of being utterly alone, about the crushing weight of the injustice. He listened, and when I was done, he said something that would become my mantra through the whole ordeal. You can't control what they do, he said. You can't make them see the truth. You can only control your own actions. Stay sober, stay honest, stick to the facts. That's your side of the street. You keep it clean, no matter how much mud they throw on theirs. That conversation was the evidentiary turning point for my own spirit. I walked home, deleted my mother's text, and recommitted to the fight. But I was fighting for a different reason now. It was no longer about winning them back or changing their minds. It was about reclaiming my own life, my own sanity, and my own truth for an audience of one, myself. The next step in the legal process was mediation. It was a mandatory step before the case could go to small claims court. Sarah explained it was a chance for both parties to present their case to a neutral third party, a mediator, who would try to help them reach a settlement. It was less formal than court, but still a serious, legally significant event. The day of the mediation, I felt sick with anxiety. Uncle Mark drove me to the office building downtown. He had insisted on coming, not as a witness, but just to be there. You're not walking in there alone, he'd said, and the simple solidarity of his presence was an anchor in the storm of my nerves. We sat in a sterile conference room with gray walls and a long, polished table. Sarah was with me, her briefcase open, her files arranged in neat stacks. facts. I focused on my breathing, using the grounding techniques my therapist had taught me. Feel your feet on the floor. Name 5 things you can see: the patterned carpet, the water pitcher, Sarah's blue pen. Then Jenna and her lawyer walked in. Seeing her in person for the first time in months was a jolt. She was dressed in a severe black suit, her hair pulled back tightly. She looked older, harder. She refused to make eye contact with me, staring straight ahead as if I were a piece of furniture. Her lawyer was a short, florid man who looked like he was sweating despite the air conditioning. The mediator, a calm woman named Mrs. Davis, explained the rules. Each side would have a chance to speak without interruption. The goal was to find common ground. I almost laughed. The only common ground Jenna and I shared was DNA. Jenna's lawyer went first. He launched into a long, rambling speech, painting a picture of Jenna as a devoted, selfless daughter, and me as a volatile, unstable opportunist with a history of substance abuse issues. He claimed the $87,000 was a gift to the family, not to any one person, and that my attempts to claw it back were a form of elder abuse against our ailing mother. He waved his hands, his voice rising with theatrical indignation. It was a performance, and a bad one at that. When it was our turn, Sarah was the opposite. She was quiet, methodical, and precise. She didn't raise her voice. She simply laid out the facts, one by one. She presented the invoice from the hospital, marked paid in full. She presented the bank statement showing the transfer from my account. She presented the screenshots of my mother's texts, thanking me. With each piece of evidence, she would slide a copy across the table to the mediator and to Jenna's lawyer. And what we have here, Sarah said, her voice even, is a clear and simple timeline. My client paid for her mother's medical care. Her sister, Jenna, then publicly and privately claimed full credit for this payment, while simultaneously launching a campaign to discredit my client, causing significant emotional and reputational harm. Jenna's lawyer scoffed. You have no proof of any such campaign. All you have is the word of a disgruntled, jealous sister. Actually, Sarah said, placing a small digital audio player on the table, we have more than her word. She looked at me and I nodded. This was the moment. She pressed play. Jenna's voice, tinny and sharp, filled the silent room. Her shriek of, "What the hell did you just do?" echoed off the gray walls. The mediator, Mrs. Davis, leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Jenna's face went pale. Her lawyer's jaw went slack. We played the entire recording. Her derisive laughter, her sneering dismissal of my contribution, her chilling statement, I won. I will always win, because I know how to play the game, and you don't. And finally, her threat, you will regret this. I will make you regret this for the rest of your life. When it was over, the silence in the room was absolute. It was thick and heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Jenna was staring at the audio player as if it were a snake. Her carefully constructed facade had been obliterated. The truth, in her own voice, had been laid bare for everyone to hear. Mrs. Davis cleared her throat. She looked at Jenna, then at her lawyer. I'm going to suggest we take a brief recess, she said, her voice tight with professional restraint. I'll speak with each party separately. She met with us first. The recording is damning, she said bluntly. Her credibility is shot. If this goes before a judge, she will be eviscerated on the stand. My advice is to hold firm on your original offer. You're in a very strong position. When she returned from meeting with Jenna and her lawyer, her face was grim. They've agreed to the settlement, she said. All terms, the letter of clarification, the $5,000, the no-contact order. They want this to go away, and they want it to go away now. And just like that, it was over. There was no dramatic courtroom confession, no satisfying moment of Jenna breaking down in tears and admitting her guilt. There was just the quiet, anticlimactic signing of papers in a soulless conference room. I signed my name, my hand steady. Jenna scribbled hers, her movements jerky and angry. She still wouldn't look at me. Walking out of that building and into the bright sunlight felt like emerging from a long, dark tunnel. Uncle Mark was waiting by the car. He just looked at me and nodded, a small, proud smile on his face. He didn't need to ask how it went. He could see it in the way I held my shoulders, in the way I was finally able to take a full, deep breath. The aftermath was quiet. The $5,000 check arrived a week later. It felt like Monopoly money. I deposited it and used it to pay off the last of Sarah's legal fees. The letter of clarification was posted on Jenna's Facebook page. It was a sterile, legalese-filled statement that admitted the surgical funds had come from a private family source and that her mother's initial post had been an emotional overstatement. It was a pathetic, mealy-mouthed version of the truth, but it was on the record. It was enough. The comments under it were a mix of confusion and awkward support. The narrative she had so carefully crafted had been permanently fractured. I never heard from my mother directly. A few weeks after the mediation, a package arrived. It was a small, heavy box with no return address, but I recognized her handwriting. Inside was a collection of old photo albums from my childhood. There was no note. I didn't know what it was meant to be. An apology? A final goodbye? A way of returning a part of my life that she no longer felt she had a claim to? I didn't know, and I realized I had to stop trying to understand her. I had to accept that her silence was her final answer. I put the albums in a closet. Maybe one day I would be able to look at them. The process of rebuilding was slow. It wasn't a triumphant march into a happy new life. It was a series of small, practical steps. I continued with my therapy, learning to process the complex grief of losing a family that was still alive. I threw myself into my sobriety, attending meetings, working with my sponsor, and finding a community of people who understood the importance of rigorous honesty. I found a new, better-paying job, and I started, dollar by dollar, to rebuild the savings I had lost. The no-contact order was the greatest gift of all. The silence from Jenna and her side of the family was a profound and healing peace. I established permanent, non-negotiable boundaries. I blocked her and the relatives who had acted as her mouthpieces on my phone and on all social media. My world became smaller, but it was also safer, saner. It was a world where I didn't have to constantly be on guard, waiting for the next manipulation, the next lie. I had to grapple with the imperfect nature of the justice I had received. Jenna would never face any real consequences beyond a small financial penalty and a public correction that most people would forget in a week. She would never understand the depth of the pain she had caused, because she was incapable of it. She would always see herself as the victim. The legal system had provided a remedy, but it couldn't provide remorse. It couldn't heal the wounds of a lifetime of betrayal. That healing was up to me. A year after the mediation, on the anniversary of my mom's surgery, I went for a hike with Uncle Mark. We sat on a rocky outcrop overlooking the city, sharing a thermos of coffee. We didn't talk about them. We talked about his garden, about a new book I was reading, about the future. As I looked out at the sprawling landscape, I thought about the life I was building. It was quiet. It was simple. It was free. The scars were still there, faint white lines on my soul, but they no longer ached. They were just a part of me, a reminder of the battle I had fought and won. Not the battle against Jenna, but the battle for myself. I had saved my own life, just as surely as I had saved my mother's. The cost had been immense, but the peace I had found was priceless. I had cleaned my side of the street, and it was finally, truly, my own.